Hello, and welcome to the South Coast Artists Index, where artists, performers, and writers, as well as curators, directors, and supporters, anyone with ties to the creative community, drops by to introduce themselves to you. We'll talk about their beginnings, their vision, their passion, and so much more. The South Coast Artist Index podcast is brought to you in part by Heavenly Spirits, who invites you to celebrate the art of life and creative communities everywhere. Learn more at heavenlyspirits.com.
Hi, this is Ron Fortier with another episode of the In Focus podcast brought to you by the South Coast Artist Index. And we have a really great guest standing in the queue, so to speak. And as with every podcast, I always ask the guest to tell us their name and spell it, just in case there's any confusion if you're listening to it while you're driving around in your car and you want to make sure that that it's correct, especially if you want to Google them or whatever. And without further ado, guest.
Sure. I'm Don Burton, spelled D-O-N-B-U-R-T-O-N, and I'm a filmmaker and digital media artist.
Excellent. How long have you been doing this? I mean, you are a sculptor. How do you go from sculpting to...
Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, I've been making films since I was in third grade on an old Super 8, movie camera that my parents showed me how to use.
Yeah,
we would take it on vacation all the time. So I was like, maybe we can make movies with that. So that was kind of always with me. But I did go into, as you say, sculpture when it came time to go to college. And that was basically because I think, if I remember correctly, somebody, the guidance counselor said, you got to move to California to make films. And I just wasn't, which isn't true. It wasn't true then either. But I was just not ready for it. So I basically went to UMass Dartmouth. And because I had always, done a lot of art, drawing, painting, sculpture, things like that as a kid. And it was actually, in my opinion, one of the better choices I made because I ended up getting a foundation in, being able to see as an artist, to think as an artist. And so my filmmaking background is really mostly self-taught, but really grounded in that fine arts education that I got at UMass Dartmouth at the College of Visual and Performing Arts.
When I thought sculpture and filmmaking, I was like, huh? And then I really thought about it. They're both about space and light.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point. And you see that visually for both mediums. It's about, with film, it's so much about the light, right? But then also it's both of them. I kind of see the narrative in film as almost a sculpture, because as you tell stories, whether it's a commercial, a 30-second commercial or a feature-length film or anything like that, you're kind of sculpting out this narrative, and you're approaching it from different angles. It might be the main character, it might be a supporting character. You might have to think about the story in relation to how a particular audience would understand what you're trying to tell them, what you're conveying. And so I've always seen it that way, that you kind of travel around, almost like walking around a sculpture. You really don't understand the sculpture fully until you've kind of moved all the way around it and kind of, taken it in from different angles. And it's the same thing with stories and narrative filmmaking, or whether it's narrative or more experimental filmmaking, it's the same thing.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. Your counselor told you that you had to go to California to do filmmaking, and that isn't necessarily correct, as you know and as I know. And were you at UConn at the time that the largest soundstage on the East Coast was created in Waterford, Connecticut, Sonolus? They're the ones who won the Academy Award for sound for The Hunt for Red October.
I think that was probably long before I went west. It might have been happening when I was at UMass Dartmouth as an undergrad. But yeah, and that was, it wasn't really on the radar for a lot of the counselors around here. It would have been wonderful for me to be able to see that here. But I ended up, I don't regret the time that I did spend. I spent over a decade, about 13 full-time years, and last year back and forth between LA and Massachusetts. So I got a real opportunity to kind of learn how the industry worked, being in that. So I wish I would have known that a little bit more.
Yeah, a friend of mine, well, two friends, actually, Leroy White, who's a performance artist, and his former partner, they had a musical duo called Con and White. And Leroy was black, and Jake was Jewish, and the stories to tell are absolutely unbelievable. But Jake went on to work at Sonolist. He was a jingle writer primarily.
Interesting.
And I went down there to meet him and, have lunch with him and stuff. And it was just like astounding to see this place.
Wow. Well,
Yeah.
I can imagine, because they would do Hump for Red October would have been the huge submarine set piece.
Exactly. And since Sonolist was a contractor for Naval Underwater Systems, or the Naval Underwater Force, it just all came together. Another quick thing, were you at 20th Century Fox?
I did a lot of work for them. So what ended up working, I didn't work for studios. They were our clients. And so we had, boutique little company that did a lot of brand content, behind the scenes things that would go to DVD or Blu-ray, TV bumpers, spots like that. And 20th Century Fox was one of our clients, yes.
All right. The reason why I bring that up is Paula's cousin's son, Bryant Vincent Rhodes, he did his MFA. He's an animator. It was an award-winning animation. It was called Mosquito, The Bite of Passage.
Ooh.
And 20th Century bought the rights out, hired him. He was working out of Connecticut, I believe.
Yeah.
And then they shipped him out to LA. So
right.
The world is so tiny, but it's amazing how many people in the business know each other or
right.
know of each other. So I take that chance to ask, the resume. My God, do you sleep?
I just know how to make the resume look good. That's all I know.
I'll have to send you my stuff so you can rewrite it. I mean, just in New Bedford alone, steering committee co-chair for AHA Monthly, Arts and Culture Night, and I've got to trying to wear headphones and cheaters glasses is difficult. The consultant for the South Coast Film Forum, advisory board member for the Co-Creative Center, advisory committee member for AHA Monthly. Oh, that's a double. Okay, you went back again. And then the artistic director for Buzzards Bay Film Festival. And then last but not least, or actually resume-wise, it's first.
Right.
The last is first, is the co-founder of BridgeThink.org. Let's start off with that one. What's BridgeThink.org? Because that sounds really intriguing to me.
Sure. So I think around 2008, it was 2008, I actually came back to New Bedford for a few weeks to shoot a short film called, ended up being called Homeland. We shot downtown in what is now Destination Soups, but at the time was On a Roll. Mm-hmm. And during that production, the whole thing, it was a short film. It became something bigger for me personally, though. I kind of adopted this idea that what happens around a project is just as important, if not more important, than the project itself. Particularly with film, right? Because you're involving so many different parties. And so, we had people come visit the set. We needed a lot of extras, and I wanted to turn it into something that was educational and a bit more lasting than what happens a lot with film production, is that everybody comes in, drops a lot of money, does something, it hits big, and then they leave, and then nothing continues after that. Mm-hmm. So out of that production, a lot of the collaborators were people that I knew from here at, just going to UMass Dartmouth, and other artists and communications professionals in the area. And then other friends in Los Angeles who felt like this might be a good opportunity to create an organization that actually can meet those needs around productions, right? Meet those needs around other, not just film, but other creative endeavors. And so we ended up starting to do dialogues. We call them creative dialogues, in which we were connecting creative communities. We did these dialogues between filmmakers working here in the South Coast of Massachusetts and independent filmmakers working in what we called industry access, which is near a hub, an industry hub being Los Angeles. So we had this thing where we called it SoCo to SoCal. And it was a fun night where those filmmakers on both coasts screened their short films. People online could watch what they were doing. They presented, they could see the films. And then we facilitated an online discussion between both groups of filmmakers and an online audience who was watching from a couple of different continents at the time, which was cool. It's funny to look at like how Zoom and, it's like, I see, for example, what Third Eye has done here in New Bedford in the last 6 months because of the pandemic. And they've got like a little TV station, and it's really amazing what they're doing. At that time, 10 years ago, that technology didn't exist. And so we're trying to do the same thing. And so we were using multiple cameras and like Ustream at the time.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. And so basically created this dialogue. So BridgeThink was something like that. We also brought the Echo Park Film Center, which is an independent film collaborative out in LA. We brought them here for an AHA night. So they drove in on their short bus that was converted into a veggie mobile. Basically, all the it ran on the oil from recycled fast food places.
Yeah.
So they drove cross country in that and came to New Bedford and did a film workshop. And it was this kind of thing. So BridgeThink became this idea that, how can we connect different, not just places, but also disciplines, and to sort of get out of our silos. Filmmakers tend to think in film, artists tend to think, within the art world. And to me, I've always personally been straddling both of those particular worlds, and then had friends who were, working in science and technology. And it was really an endeavor to try and create these dialogues where we could break down those walls and bridge these ways of thinking, and present that to an audience that that might not necessarily see it that way. And so I think that's probably just a way of thinking more and more these days. 10 years ago, it was kind of, we would just be up against the wall, in terms of like, who would we talk to? An artist would be like, oh, it's great. You work in film, but the dialogues weren't happening. These days, those things just tend to happen more.
Yeah, there's been a lot of normal evolution, and then I really believe. In fact, I was thinking, I also write and thinking that it's the pandemic paradigm.
Yeah.
And a paradigm is an evolutionary imposition, a revolutionary imposition on an evolutionary process. And you, with this BridgeThink, was so far ahead of this process. Ben Gilbarg from Third Eye,
right,
it has taken him 20 years to get to this point. What he did, I'd love to, he's definitely on my hit list, so to speak, to get a podcaster.
He's great.
There's just so much of that. And part of the philosophy, the mission statement of the Artist Index is to find this connectivity we'd love to be able to index, and I'm speaking with the Whaling Museum on a project to index every artist from as far back as we can figure 1750.
Oh, wow.
That was about a time where artists started to take off and go to England because they couldn't last around here. Singleton Copley, all those guys all jumped over there.
Right.
So from 1750 to the present, of course, now we've got this massive block of dead guys, you know, that we have to do a lot of research and so on and so forth. And then we have the contemporary and meaning of now. A lot of people confuse contemporary with modern.
Right.
To, you know, try to do a podcast with every single person. Now that's a daunting task because Hatch Street has 65 people alone. We've already, you'll be the 55th podcast. And there could be more, but I'm like a one-arm paper hanger with an itch. And even though I've got some, you know, like my wife does the VOs, the intros and outros. She sometimes does the editing. Jeff Watton sometimes does the editing. Jen, they just hired at Spectrum Marketing Group, does the editing. But there's just a lot of components. But the point of the index itself is, I asked you, for example, did you ever run into Brian Vincent Rhodes? Had you said yes, that would have been very interesting because now you've got a connection to Detroit.
Yep.
It's amazing. It's the 6 degrees of separation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And that amazes me. I don't know why it does, but it absolutely amazes me because it's happened to me. The reason why I went to the University of Miami was because a student at SMU, Cuban refugee, who had been at St. Joseph's Home Orphanage in Fall River because they've been separating children from their parents for a long time.
Right.
He somehow reconnected, found them, figured, what the heck, I'm in Miami, might as well apply. They've got a good art program there.
Right.
And the department chair saw my slides, because back in those days, everybody used to have 35mm slides of all their friends.
Yep.
He was told, tell your friend to get his ass down here. And again, so that is kind of like a really serendipitous kind of situation. Had I not known Larry, I would have never gotten down to Miami. Had I not been in Miami, blah, 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 blah.
All these doors open.
Exactly.
You know, as if we engage with the world around us, you even know where it's going to take you, right?
Exactly.
I mean, and you spent time and actually lived more recently, right? You went over to Portugal as well.
To Portugal, exactly, yeah. For an entire year, and off you know, the recording, because I'd really love to talk to you about that. In fact, there is a project I do want to talk to you about if you've got a few minutes after we close, after we wrap up. But yeah, this idea of connectivity, you know, I always used to tell my marketing students, you've got to connect the dots. Seems easy enough, right? No, it's not. First, you got to find the dots. You know, once you find the dots, then you can start to connect them.
Yep.
And that gives you the entire picture.
Right.
There are so many filmmakers in this area, which is kind of interesting. I worked with John Methia. I wrote copy for a couple of scripts for him from ClickNet.tv. He's, at the time, he was like 8, 9, 10 Emmy, you know, award-winning film producer. There's, oh God, they have to forgive me. I'm just blanking out. There's a couple of other people here.
Right.
But this little town of New Bedford.
Yep.
I'm saying this as I'm across the river in Fairhaven. But this little town of New Bedford, is it unique? Because we have this incredible creative history that touches Hollywood, it touches music, it touches the fine arts, it touches absolutely everything.
It certainly feels like that to me. You know, I grew up over in Somerset, and when I went to UMass Dartmouth, it was our junior and senior year was actually down in the old, what is now where Groundworks is. It was before the Star Store opened up.
Yeah.
Which I guess that was New Bedford Tech, the old, right?
Yeah. And my dad used to teach across the street. He taught textiles. He was a textile instructor.
Got it.
Weaving
Yeah.
instructor, yeah.
And so even with that, you know, what I found was that there was just this sort of it's kind of an incubator of creativity happening around here. At that time, you know, downtown wasn't quite as anything like it is now. We'd hightail it back to main campus, but over the years, I just, you know, while I was in LA, I just kind of looked back and reacquainted myself with New Bedford, and I saw exactly what you just said, that there's this uniqueness, there's this creativity, there's a sense of we can get it done, we can do it. And not even that. I'd say take that back and say that it's actually everybody says yes to ideas here, right? And that was really exciting to me. Actually, I think I've found that I've been able to achieve more creatively here, independently, than I did in LA, which is actually, you know, there was more business there, but independently as a creator, I've gotten so much more done here because people say yes. They're excited about different things, and you get a lot of different artists. Like I said, you know, filmmakers and artists, but everybody's a creator. Everybody's an artist in this sense of the word, right?
Yeah, look at Fitzcarmel Lemaire with his New Bedford. I mean, if he had tried to, I don't know, and this is not a judgment, it's just a supposition. If he had tried to launch that anywhere,
right?
I don't know how far. I mean, people came out in droves. They're like, "This is so cool."
They love it. They loved it.
Yeah.
And that's just it. It almost like New Bedford has a brand, right? You know, when nobody else was wearing those types of shirts that say, you know, I love NB. I remember coming back and seeing like, I heart NB on these black shirts, and I'm like, this is like being in New York. This is really such pride and excitement. So yeah, I can see people jumping in on something like Fitz's project like that because they see an opportunity to see themselves and their community, you know, put together in a story, and that it's really awesome.
Look what Passionata did. You know, I mean, that lit up the Portuguese community like crazy, you know.
Right.
And, you know, for the longest time, you know, for the city that lit the world, they kept a bushel over that lantern for a long time. It's like, oh, why would you want to? That was their attitude. Why would you want to do that here? Oh, nothing ever works here. No, you know, if you want to be famous, if you want to make it, you got to leave here. And that was the attitude for the longest time. And it was a very down kind of, obviously a very down attitude to have. And then a couple of people came and started kicking that basket and kicked it off. And all of a sudden, how far back does it go for Richard Florida, 2007, who came up with the most creative city concept, you know, that he had his index that he had going. All of a sudden people are like, damn, us? Really? Nah. And then I think 2, 3, maybe 4 more national surveys around the same ilk came out. And of course, it didn't hurt that Florida's thing came out in the Atlantic Monthly. And then people are going, wow, I didn't know that. And again, it's a city of just around 90,000, give or take. And you've got 65 artists in the Hatch Street studios alone.
And now we've got Kilburn Mill in the South End.
Exactly.
Which is doing artist studios. There's the, you know, the artist studios above the No Problemo downtown.
Right. The Cummings building. There's the Rope Works.
Yes.
I mean, they're like fleas. We're like fleas. You know, I mean, it's absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
And what, you know, you were working on a couple of interesting projects, a lot of them. Abolition Row. Now, my sister-in-law is Karen Batchelor, is the first Black woman admitted into the Daughters of the American Revolution.
Oh.
She did it the hard way, before computerization. So she did all of her genealogy the old-fashioned way, going into the musty, dusty, you know, libraries and so on and so forth. She's absolutely astounded by the Black history. That's another thing.
Yes.
You can't watch Glory without knowing, hey, you know, we're in there. You can't watch um, Harriet,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and several other movies. I mean, there's another kind of thing. What is this thing here?
Yeah. I think so. You bring up the just that sense of uniqueness about New Bedford, and it's these stories that kind of link it to, you know, larger phenomenon that and movements that were going on from present day back to the, you know, in this regard, abolition times, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I had that opportunity a couple of years ago to do all the video work and documentary work around Abolition Row, the Black Spaces Matter show, and it was a collaboration between the New Bedford Historical Society and UMass Dartmouth, and it was what was great about it was that we got to see the history, and then also what it's like today. Who lives in these homes today? Who owns the Lewis Temple house? You know, Lewis Temple being the African-American blacksmith who created the toggle iron that revolutionized whaling, right?
Right.
You know, so getting to know, then that leads into the Cape Verdean history, you know, and how all of this is intertwined is really interesting, and how it links to today. You know, Lee Blake, president of the Historical Society, said something really revealing when we first started on this project. And she said, you know, back in that day, there was no New Bedford's claim to fame for a while was that no former slave or enslaved person had been reclaimed from New Bedford, where they had been reclaimed from Boston or Providence
or Philadelphia. Yeah,
exactly. You know, during the Fugitive Slave Act. And that was because she said this, you know, New Bedford was a sanctuary city of its time. And this is a term that they might not have used then, but we use today, sanctuary cities, you know, in regard to immigration and protection of immigrants, and specifically against ICE, you know, and the
INS, originally,
exactly.
yeah.
Right. You know, it's a lot of people like to think of it as a black and white border, you know, in terms of like, you know, this is the U.S. and you have to be here, and you're illegal if you're not here legally.
Exactly.
Nobody's illegal, right? So there's this whole movement around that, and I thought, wow, look at that. There's New Bedford, you know, 150 more than that, but you know, years ago, dealing with similar issues and taking a stand on that. And so the Black Spaces Matter show was really not just a historical piece, you know, we did 13 short films, short documentary pieces.
Yeah, short forms, yeah.
Yep, and it was an exhibition that went up to the Boston Architectural College, and then came back to New Bedford at the College of Visual and Performing Arts at the Star Store the following year. And it was really an opportunity for people to understand the history, but to see how that impacted the present. You know, we had an interview with John Stauffer, who wrote the book on Frederick Douglass's fascination and command of photography, you know, self-portrait, right? So, you know, he had people taking photos of himself, but he was really, according to Stauffer, Frederick Douglass was really planning the how he wanted to be presented, because he knew the power of that medium, photography. And Stauffer makes the incredible connection to how photography today, in terms of video and film, is transformative. At that time, Douglass wanted it to be a tool to show people that African Americans were human, that they were on, you know, he could totally subvert any of the untruths that a white photographer could try and, or not a photographer, a white illustration artists could, you know,
right.
in that and make, you know, and show African Americans as not equal, right? Well, then he makes that link to today. Look at what, you know, cell phone videos have done to expose the injustices in terms of police brutality. And that's been revolutionary. So what I thought was really fascinating for this particular show, the Black Spaces Matter show, was that it wasn't just the historical, it was the present at the same time. And we were drawing these lines, and how New Bedford in particular, with the abolition of its time, connected to that, because that story, that history of abolition here in New Bedford is something that really wasn't always told. I think the Historical Society really succeeded in bringing that story to the forefront over the last 20 years.
Yeah. I mean, was it Roach who in Newport, get thee in, I mean, and these guys were hard businessmen,
right?
The Quakers, but there's just so much to talk about. But what did BSM or Black Spaces Matter predate Black Lives Matter?
No, it didn't. And that
right.
was actually a good point. I'd like to make that point too, because at the time, we started on this. There were 4 of us, I believe, and it was an initiative out of the art history department at UMass Dartmouth,
mm-hmm.
and Lee Blake was holding down the community side of all of that. And I think somebody on the UMass Dartmouth side said, it would be interesting to call it Black Spaces Matter, because it was really talking about valuing these spaces, these homes that we have here. And they might be more humble homes, they're behind the mansions, right? They're the more middle class, the lower class homes that African Americans and others in that movement lived in. And I thought to myself at the time, and I said it to everybody, I said, look, I don't know about calling it Black Spaces Matter. There's 4 of us, 3 of us are white, or 2 of us were white, 1 is Iranian, and 1 person is Black. I said that I'm not sure. And Lee Blake came forward to, no, I think that's important. It's in terms of calling it that. She was on board. So the minute she said that was that she was cool with that's what she wanted, I said, okay, well then I got to up my game. Here's this white filmmaker, telling stories about Black history. No, so I did that at that point, and I'm actually glad that the name was came up like that, because what it did was it caused me to reach out to African Americans and Cape Verdeans who could be part of this in telling that story. And so I reached out to Jan De Silva of the National Park Service. I reached out to Anne-Marie Lopes at Cable Access, and they really became very close collaborators in consulting.
There's just so much there, the Cranberry Pickers, which
right.
is it's still part of their culture, because of they were the only ones that could pick the cranberries, it seems.
Right.
They saved whaling along with the Açorians.
Right.
And then when they got to music, oh my God! And and I part of this whole artist index thing is 3 things: there's visual, there's performing, and there's literary artists. As much as I'd love to be in on every one of these conversations, I can't. One of the goals is to get somebody who's really into the music part, especially the performing arts, and really bring this out. I mean, Paul Gonsalves, one of the baddest sax players that ever lived, came from here. He saved, according to Ralph Hickok, saved Duke Ellington Orchestra at the Newport Jazz Festival from crumbling apart. And I think he still holds the record for like 23 choruses, in his solo.
Right.
And that's just them. And then, there's the Tavars, which I think they may have been very, very much instrumental to get the pride back, saying, hey, damn, top 10, really? Billboard?
They're great.
Yeah. And that just touching on that alone. So you've got this incredible jazz heritage.
Yep.
And then there's the other part of their music that you don't hear it outside of their circles. And it's Murna, the Cape Verdean version of Fado.
Okay.
And there's just, there's 7 lifetimes here of
there's a whole
information.
thing. One of the fascinating things in terms that we got to do an interview. I think it might have been one of the last interviews that she did with Anna Senna. I don't know if you know Anna. She also went by Minnie Senna.
Okay, I heard her name. Yes.
Yeah. And so she was Cape Verdean woman. She was in her 80s at the time. She passed away, I believe, last year. But she was instrumental in saving a huge swath of what is now Abolition Row from urban renewal, and it was great to hear her talk about that. So it's this sense of preservation of a culture, really, and I think we all gain so much more when a culture is able to remain. It's not gentrified, right? That's a huge thing, right? And I think as artists, we need to keep this in mind. How do we combat gentrification? Sometimes, quite often, we can be part of it without meaning to be part of it. And then we get pushed out as well, right? No matter what the color of our skin is. But that's a big thing. And so Cape Verdean culture is so strong here. I'm with you. It's the music. But it's also in protecting that and preserving that culture. I thought that was really interesting, getting to speak to this particular woman, mm-hmm. Anna. And like I said, she's now passed on. I think we have the last interview with her. And goosebumps.
Yeah, well, that's another thing too. Another thing that is part of this, universe of the Artist Index. South Coast Artist Index is basically a place holder. And this is a highly franchisable project because it could be sold across the country. And so if you're from Poughkeepsie, it could be the Poughkeepsie Artist Index. And at some point in time, to see as many franchisees as possible, all feeding their information up into the mothership. And we talk about the genealogy or the DNA or the connectivity of people. Right. It would be absolutely, fascinating. When I got out of grad school in 77, and shortly after that, my daughter was born in 78. So there's been about 42-year slog going up this slippery, muddy hill where everybody was miserable. You had whale that came into being, and then all of these other occurrences that are all piling on top of each other. And having, left the country for a year, and I came back, and the dike, with the walkway, looked cleaner. It looked more organized. There's just a different vibe to the city. Yeah. But obviously, it doesn't reach down into every community. And now we've got that push-up that's coming, as it always has. The Jewish community was down on South Water Street. They had their temple down there. As they came up, they moved up. Then somebody filled that void. And then somebody filled that void. So everybody keeps moving up. And this is all important. This is all very, very important. The whole AHA monthly, the arts and culture thing is another huge element. Mm-hmm. I remember hearing about it, and I still hadn't re-entered the art space because I had spent so much time in marketing and advertising, and I never reached my personal goal of being a painting and drawing instructor, because success is all about timing, not luck. Recession after recession, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So I was like, blah, blah, yeah. And I remember, I'm going to go down there and go meet, I think it was Don Wilkinson, the first person I met during an AHA night. And I'm just going to go down there.
Right.
What the hell? I can't find a parking space. And I had worked as a manager at Freestones back then. And we were the only light on in the whole downtown area, after 5 o'clock.
Right.
I was totally stunned. And it's gone on for now, was it 25 years?
It's 21 years, somewhere around that. Yep.
Okay, we're getting close to 25.
Yeah.
What was your input or your collaboration or contribution to the AHA?
So yeah, basically when around that time that we were doing BridgeThink and I was coming back to do those projects, I remember just stepping out of the art museum, which is another phenomenal resource that we have here in downtown, right? The shows that they're curating are just very interesting now, very contemporary. So I went in there and all of a sudden I started to hear, it was a Thursday night, and I started to hear this commotion outside. I walked outside and it was this parade of different things regarding the environment, you know, and the arts and everything kind of mixed together. There was this sort of like floating whale that was paper mache whale, looked very, very much like you know, the Chinese dragon from the Chinese New Year, right?
Was Vinnie Lovegrove involved in that? With his puppets? Okay.
Maybe he might have been. Yeah, this was way early. And so basically what it was the Earth Eve parade that AHA does every year in April. I think it's April. And I was like, whoa, this is wild. Where is this? Oh, everybody came out of the woodwork, right? And then I realized, oh, this is an AHA night. And that they became sort of a go-to situation for me when I was wanting to know what was going on in the city. So when I did end up moving back, I became involved in it and got on the steering committee, and eventually took part in by being the chairperson for the steering committee. So, you know, it's not really anything more than just trying to support, you know, and I do a lot of support through filming things, you know, AHA Lives, Facebook Live moments, and in providing a perspective. You know, I live just outside of downtown, so I'm walking around a lot prior to the pandemic. You know, I'd be just speaking with people, you know, and just keeping our finger on the pulse. And what do the partners need? What is it? What's changing for them? You know, and kind of keeping that perspective was my contribution to AHA.
What do you see? I want to start wrapping it up, but what do you see in the future for yourself?
It's a good question. I'm working on trying to figure out what the next narrative piece is going to be. You know, I just would love to be able to shoot another narrative short film, something that could then turn into a feature-length piece. Documentary work is, you know, something.
Is that your first love?
I don't know if it's my first love. I'm just, God, I'm so eclectic. I like everything.
Yeah, I understand.
You know, that's the thing. I remember in graduate school, like, you got to pick one thing. And I just don't think you have to pick one thing. Yeah. You know, like I said, I've done that. You can see that that there's documentary tendencies in a lot of the things that I talk about. Right. But then at the same time, there's the sense of creating something completely, you know, from scratch, a world that like a feature film or a narrative piece. There might also be more video installation work that might be coming up. So we'll see.
I've got a project for you.
Oh, you got, I should have told you that I'm too busy.
Yeah. Well, actually, no, this is one that would require, you know, it's going to require grants and blah, 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 because obviously none of us like to work for nothing. But we have an opportunity. I went to Peter Pereira, as you know. He's from the other side of the bay from where I lived. He's from Covagalla, and my mother, God bless her, she just turned 94 today. She's in Praia de Boa Cruz in Figueira da Foz. And there is an incredible mural there that was created by an artist. He's internationally known as Luis Suarez. He lives in Spain for some reason, I think because he has better facilities for a ceramics business that he's in. And he did a 300 centimeter, oh my God, blanking out on the European version of feet. It's just
meters.
300 meters, yeah. So it's like it's a big mural.
Yeah.
And he printed another set of these tiles, and he wants to give them to the city of New Bedford
Oh, wow.
for an installation. Now, in Portuguese, it's the title of the piece is called Homenagem a Gentes do Mar. It's an homage to the people of the sea.
Yep.
Now, Figueira and New Bedford are sister cities. A majority of the fishing folk in the fleet are from Figueira.
Okay.
So there's this incredible heritage thing, traditions, and so on and so forth.
Right.
That it's not just putting up this mural and getting a space and the money to erect it, but it's so much more.
Yeah. Yeah. It's what happens around the project that matters.
Well,
Yep.
exactly what you said. There's always the backstory is sometimes even more enthralling than the story itself.
Exactly.
So I'll leave it at that. And we can talk about it off episode here.
Sure.
I'm going to ask you a Barbara Walters question.
Uh-oh.
And this will wrap it up. All right.
Okay.
If you had a magic wand and you only had one wish, what would that one wish be? And it could be anything. It could be anything. The first thing that jumps into your mind, like right out of Ghostbusters, the first thing you shall think of.
Oh, right now I want this freaking pandemic to end.
Yeah.
I think that's too easy of a question, though.
Yeah.
Oh, geez, Ron, that's a tough one.
Well, it's better than if you were a tree. What kind of a tree would you be, right? That was another one of hers, right?
Oh God, I'd be a sequoia. I want to be around for a long time.
Long time. Yeah.
Yeah, I think. There's just so much injustice. I think maybe one of the big things that I come back to with my projects is that what's the kind of agency that people have, right? Are they in charge of their future, right? And instead of being sort of pawns of a sort of a corporate, oligarchic society that we're moving towards, right? We're probably in. These are big thoughts, right? So I'd say maybe the wish would be that we could all be a bit more aware of those what's influencing us and our opportunities, and so that we can create our own futures and be more active, because I think this is a fascinating thing to me, right? We're sort of adolescents as a society in regard to our online dialogue, right? The web, especially Facebook, social media in general, has opened up the opportunity for dialogue like we've never had before. And people are like, yeah, but everybody's just yelling back and forth at each other. Well, yeah, I mean, when somebody's growing up, they first start to have ideas about the world, they get angry, right? Eventually, they get past that. And I think as a society, we're sort of there in that adolescent stage of being able to talk about politics and economics and everything. And if maybe my wish would be as we move forward, we get to become more aware, and we can actually be much more effective at choosing our own paths as a society, as groups of people, right? And not being pawns in the whole game that's out there right now. That's a really abstract wish, Ron. I'm sorry. I wish I could come up with something more entertaining for you.
No. I mean, and then you are in a perfect position to see that dream come true, because you're a storyteller. You're a filmmaker.
Yeah, stories, right?
Yeah,
Stories, yeah.
It's all about stories. That's how my mom, brought me up. It's all about the stories, and and then there's another thing too, is you can't change people's minds until you change their hearts.
Yes.
And if you present a story that even the most hardcore, probably even repulsive person that you have ever encountered, if it doesn't crack that shell and change their thought processes,
yeah,
then you got to go back to the drawing board. But I really do think I mean, StoryCorps, I've, listened to the episodes around 9/11, and
Yeah. They're big, right?
Yeah.
They have the opportunity, the way to influence people's perception.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking of this, it actually came in a fortune cookie. So get a load of this. It's what you're saying, right? You can't change people's minds until they change their hearts. People are not persuaded by what we say, but rather by what they understand. And I'm like, ooh,
Yeah.
that's you can talk at somebody. There's that old adage that, communication is not what you say, but what people hear.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes back to what you just said, right? Emotions. People get caught up in their emotions.
Yeah.
If we can start there, then maybe we can find a little leverage, right?
Exactly.
And it's not just drama. It's also humor.
Yeah.
Humor is great. What I'll tell you, and I should say this, what got me into film when I was a kid was Charlie Chaplin. Watching his films, they were understandable. I could say I could make something like that, right?
He was almost a social scientist in his own way.
He was, right. And when I say make something, it was just technically, it wasn't so out of the, it wasn't like Star Wars, which I also loved at that age. But what I didn't realize then until I got a little older was, like you said, he's a social scientist. He was actually making comments on the struggles of his time, modern times, about being a cog in a machine, right? And it's so much more, making films against fascism. But he was doing it in a funny, really entertaining way that was also making a difference in the minds and the hearts of the people that were watching. And I love that. So yeah, comedy is part of it all. We need that. We need to laugh.
Yeah, we need to laugh. That's for sure. Don, this has been phenomenal. This is another one of those podcasts where, if you could go on 2, 3, 4 hours and still not have enough, an ending point. But as I tell everybody on the show, this is not a one and done deal. It's not a one shot. I've already had several guests back. And I think it's also important to have them back because there's like a buffering of time, and you can explain what you think wasn't clear, or you can remember what you couldn't remember, and so much more. And it's because we have all these people here, and they're not just pages, they're complete chapters and complete volumes. We have such a fascinating vibrant community that's what this is all about. And I've learned so much. Yeah.
Isn't that the thing when you interview people, right? I've had the opportunity to learn so much from others, and it enlightens us in so many ways. I can totally tell where you're coming from.
Yeah. I think I learned a lot of this too from living in Europe, even though it was only a year. It was too short, but there's a cafe society there that I keep bringing that back about the artists. We need to have artist cafes, and it's basically no structure. It's just meeting, talking, drinking coffee or whatever. We need sociability. We need socialization that before we took for granted.
Yes. Yeah. In big ways, right? Artists bump into each other, ideas bump into each other, and then all of a sudden the spark happens. Oh,
right.
Man.
The conversations in the hallway are way better than the conversations that occur in the meeting room or in the office.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's it. It's because it's over a cup of coffee, a beer, God knows what,
Exactly. There's no agenda.
Yeah.
Don, thank you so much. Hope to have you back on the show. And till the next time, this is Ron Fortier. Thank you for joining us. And we hope you've gotten to know Don Burton a little bit better. Thanks. Bye-bye.
We'll see you next week for another episode of the South Coast Artist Index podcast. The South Coast Artist Index podcast is brought to you in part by Heavenly Spirits, who invites you to celebrate the art of life and creative communities everywhere. Learn more at heavenlyspirits.com. To learn more about the South Coast Artist Index, visit theartistindex.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Be the artist you believe you are, and let's take care of each other out there.